Welcome to 3PNR. I'm your host, Adam R. Joining me again is Cheryl Costa. Cheryl, how you doing?
Good. How you doing, Adam?
Doing great. I'm glad to have you back. We'll start off with this real brief. I heard a scientist say this on a documentary. His exact words were, "There's not enough data to support the idea of UFOs in America."
Yeah, all right.
When I heard that, I about died. Let's forget the United States releasing their videos, which is pretty tangible from 2017 and some of the newer videos they have. But people like you and the data you've compiled and the data that MUFON's compiled and the data that it's like they're ignoring this. It's bizarre.
Well, you're right. I have reached out to 3 dozen TV stations. I did a map recently. Some months ago, I did a map. I generated a map of the United States using data, and basically it was the 3,200 counties, 3132 counties in the United States, and you saw a handful of little black dots. Okay. And those black dots were the 105 counties that did not have UFO sighting reports between 2001 and 2020.
You know, and there's a lot of investigators that cite your books, by the way, a lot.
Yeah.
And
I hear that.
Not just regular investigators. We're talking former cops, private investigators. Like, these are people that they want to seed out these informations, and your book comes up. And I mention your book as often as possible. If I come across someone investigating and I don't hear your book mentioned, I make sure I mention it to them.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
It's great data.
Well, here's what I did. I went on. I'm an old school transgender activist back from the bad old days of the 80s.
Right.
Okay. In fact, I'm one of the 6 people who coined the term transgender.
Huh. Oh, yeah, you did tell me that. That's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah, well, your audience probably doesn't know this. The real short story was there was a bunch of us who had to be out for professional reasons.
Right. Okay. Right.
I had a security clearance, and I had to be able to prove that I wasn't blackmailable because of me being a trans person. Huh. So I came out on national television. I was on Gary Collins' Hour magazine, and the rumor is I was on Phil Donahue, but it was actually a different show. But the bottom line was, I went into the guy at the Defense Department security guy who was giving me the hard time, and I threw a VHS tape on the desk, and I said, "I'm the blonde on Phil Donahue. I'm the redhead on Gary Collins." And he said, "Last 2 weeks you came out on national television." And I said, "Yeah, I can't be blackmailed." "Oh, I made VHS tapes and handed them out to all the guys in the shop. They went home and watched them with their wives, And so a week later, they sent me a letter that said, "We thought that was bad judgment. We're sending you to see a Defense Department shrink."
Wow. I mean,
go ahead.
I mean, that's, it's your prerogative. It's who you are. It defines you.
Well, no, they had these Clinton back in the 70s and 80s. If a gay person, LGBT person went in for a security clearance, they got what was called, usually if you went in for a security clearance, they talked to you for about 45 minutes. They talked to your manager for half an hour, and it was usually a rubber stamped issue. Okay.
Right.
If you admitted that you were gay, which you really had to, it turned into a 6 to 7 hour hostile interview.
That's bizarre. Listen,
that used to be the standard for it. Okay. I got put through a solid 8 hours. Then they came back about a week later with a second agent with the original guy, and they ran me through a half a day. And like I said, they said, "Oh, we think you can be blackmailed, so we're going to turn off your clearance." I said, "I think I can fix that if you give me a couple of weeks." He said, "I'll be back in 2 weeks. I'll turn off your clearance then." And so I had these invitations to go out and be on some of these national talk shows.
Right.
Okay. I talked to my spouse of that era, and it says, "It's that or my job." And she said, "Let's go," And so we got first class airline tickets. They put us up in the concierge suites in the hotels, and I came on in all my glory, and female glory. And so they sent me to say the shrink. Okay. The guy talked to me for 20 minutes, and he looks at me, lights up his pipe, and he says, "Cheryl, you're saner than the people who sent you here."
Yeah. You know what it is, Cheryl? It's a lot of these ancient Roman customs that we still have in our current day and age, where we're still abiding by something that has no evidence of its proof. right? And the rules it's set up. There's a comedian named George Carlin. He talks about the 10 Commandments. And,
oh, God, yeah, I'm a big fan of George.
Yeah, it's supposed to be funny, but when you hear what he says, it's spot on. Like
it is.
It's a contradiction in itself.
Wise man. He's got an honored place in my household, you know?
Yeah, so to be a transgender it shouldn't matter, right? It's the mind.
Okay,
it's the quality
where
of
the term came from. Let me explain what happened.
Sure.
Because I was out, it suddenly was a degree of freedom. I can be out professionally. Okay?
Right.
And that was a big deal back in the 80s. I mean, even the gay people weren't out like that. Okay? Only a few people. Okay? So there were about 6 of us that were members of a 12-member board called the International Foundation for Gender Education. It was out of someplace up in Boston. And there were 6 of us who were out for one reason or another. Okay? Most of it professional. And we were out doing talks with editors for newspapers. And remember how like, the Sunday paper used to have like magazines like Parade and things like that stuck into them, you know?
Yeah.
So major magazines that were that kind of thing. And we were doing these interviews about the topic, but we were stuck using these clinical terms from DSM-3. It's DSM-5 now, but DSM-3 in those days, cross-dresser, drag queen, transsexual. They were clinical terms. So we said, we got to come up with something better than that because it already has a stigma, you know, and again, the stigma thing rolls over into UFOs, if you know what I mean.
Right.
But so this one medical doctor who was on the board, who was also in transition herself, you know, and said, why don't we make an umbrella term? We'll call it like transgender, cover everybody, you know? And so the 5 or 6 of us that were out doing these newspaper and talk radio shows, things like this, TV, and started doing talk TV, you know, you pick the talk show from that era, including the People Are Talking series across the country, and we were doing it. Okay. And so we got it into the lexicon over a period of about 5 to 10 years. And that's how I was one of the people that have coined that term. And
it's good though. Like you pioneered. I mean, it still blows my mind, right? That now there's still racism and that there's still people judging people on their preference. It blows
I had somebody
my mind.
on Twitter. Somebody asked me a question about my transition. It came up in a UFO conversation.
Right.
Okay. And there are people in the UFO community who don't like the fact that me and Linda are a gay couple and I'm a trans person. Now, you make it, you know, saying I'm a trans person, most people are, are you going to have an operation? Baby, that's old news. I did that 33 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, but you know, Cheryl, if tomorrow a dog brought me great data regarding a UFO, the source shouldn't matter. You know,
well,
it's the data.
In 2019, I was booked someplace every 2 weeks for the entire year.
Right.
I would literally come home, wash the clothes that I wore at the conference, and literally repack them. And I wore the same set of clothes at every one of the conferences that I went to. Okay.
Right.
And looking at the pictures, you can't tell what one I was at because my clothes are always the same.
It's actually kind of smart.
Yeah. Well, I learned that being a business traveler, you know, so the deal was, we had that pushback after our first book came out. Oh, they're a gay couple. What can they know about UFOs? And, they don't do field investigation. They just got charge graphs and numbers. Duh. You know, and that's what we ran up against. And we asked a couple of the experts in the community. We says, is it our perception or is this pushback against us? And both these guys over dinner looked at us and says, no, it's not. You're perceiving correctly. So I was getting ready to do this series. So what I did was I added 5 extra slides. And after the introduction slides with our normal PR pictures in the title frame, here's a picture of me in the Air Force in a combat helmet in Vietnam. And then it turns into, you see a picture of me with a big bushy red beard in the Navy uniform. Okay, I'm not chief petty officer, but a petty officer uniform. And then my glamour shot. Okay. Huh. And I said, that's who I became. Okay. And then I showed a picture of me and Linda jumping over the broom in our Scottish tartan. And I said, she is not my sister. because people were telling us, oh, and your sister to help you write the book, and your sister-in-law, or whatever, And I said, no, we're married, And I said, and then I would look at the audience. And the first place I did this was MegaCon down in Laughlin, Nevada. And there were 600 people in the audience. And I said, if you can't deal with me, folks, you can't deal with ET.
Yeah, honest. I'm glad you said that, because
I got a 600. I was expecting to get stoned off the stage, but I got a 600 person standing ovation. It shocked the hell out of me.
Well, I mean, you said it perfectly. Listen, if an advanced species came here with negative intentions, you think it gives a shit about your preference or what you are? It doesn't care. It's coming here for a purpose. It's not gonna care whether you're white, black, trans, gay. None of that matters to them. They're coming here for a reason. Either it's to study or take over. In either event, whatever you are here matters none to them. And even better than that, when we're talking in terms of paranormal, when we perish from this place, based on what I think, we're the energy in our body, our soul, and our consciousness being the same thing. It's just raw energy. When we die from here, we all look the same. We're just raw energy.
Hey, we're connected to every atom and molecule everywhere, every when in the universe.
Mm.
That's Cheryl, the mystic who spent 7 years in a Buddhist monastery and who is an ordained yogi, is telling you.
Right.
We're connected to everybody out there. In fact, I had to put a chapter in the book I published back in January. It's called the Magical Musings of a Rogue Witch. Okay. And I basically teach the high physics of metaphysics. Okay. Of magic.
Okay.
As high physics, not as I stripped away all of the cultural overtones, the robes and the wands and the candles and all this stuff. And I went right down to what the physics is and how it works.
And it ended up sounding like science, right?
Yes, it
exactly.
did. I basically said, guys, this is the mechanic. I wrote a book. This was what a Wicca priestess writes when they're retiring. And some of them write a memoir of their coven. Some people write their own memoir of their life in magic. There's this expectation in my lineage that you do this, right? And I decided to take on magical mechanics. And the first version I wrote back in 2004, this is before I came out with UFOs. The first version of this I wrote in 2004. My adult daughter, who at that time was in her 30s, an adept in her own right, she read it and said, you can't publish this. And I said, why? Is there something wrong with it? She says, you're handing out loaded shotguns to third graders. Now, does that sound like the aliens too?
Yeah.
Hey, wow, the monkey kids have got atom bombs,
Exactly.
that kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so I said, okay, I put it on the shelf for about 18 months. And then one Saturday afternoon, I took it down off the shelf, dusted it off, read through the thing, took it out in the backyard, put it on the grill, put lighter fluid on it, and burned it.
Damn.
I didn't like what I wrote either.
Is that mostly because here? Let's be frank.
Go ahead.
If you have someone in the 3-letter acronyms in our country hear about a book where there's potentially magic in it, their first thoughts are, well, how do we use this against our enemies?
Oh, I've already been down that road.
Yeah. So, I mean,
I had CIA. I saw their business card, so to speak. Okay. I mean, their ID card. When I started, I produced back in 1991, I produced a program, about first program, regularly scheduled television program about witchcraft, produced for witches by witches. My first contract was for 6 measly episodes because the cable station was nervous about doing it, figured that everybody would be out there protesting with big signs and everything. And about a week before it debuted, somehow the story leaked out. We'd already taped all 6 shows, and it leaked out. And I get a phone call from the chief production manager, and he says, hey, Cheryl, a 300-word story went out on the Associated Press this afternoon. And I says, oh, was it positive? He said, well, yeah, I guess it was positive. I said, did we get some press ink out of it? Cheryl, no. He says, CBS and ABC News are sitting in the lobby, and they want to talk to your witches.
Oh, man.
And it went to that story, did that. ABC, I went down and talked to the ABC guys that night, along with the host of the show. And then the next day, the CBS folks met me at lunchtime, and I talked to them. The station started getting an average of 8 to 12 phone calls for the next 10 weeks from some a radio network or another who had a talk show host who wanted to talk to us. Larry King had us on the night that our show debuted on June 6, 1991. Okay. Larry King had the two of us on. Of course, remember, I'm a trans person. And while both of us were dressed up very nicely, okay, very professionally, 75,000 people called the Larry King show and said, "That's a man in a dress," but okay, fine.
People.
Again, we're breaking down barriers, as they say. This cable station, after that appearance on Larry King, and people say, well, people these days ask me, when did you come out as a witch? I came out on June 6th, 1991 on the Larry King show. In print, I came out on the 18th of June, 1991 on the front page of the Metro section of the Washington Post. The first line is, "Cheryl Costa is a witch." And the article went on from there.
It makes me question, like, the definition of witch, right? Let's rewind time real quick.
Go there, because this has a lot to do with our UFO culture.
Yeah, culture, period. Because if you go back in time to medieval times, and there was plagues and people are dying, and I read a story about a woman.
Got to blame it on somebody.
Well, not even that. The woman who healed people, she basically concocted something to help people heal, and they labeled her a witch, and they executed her. Because they couldn't comprehend what the alchemy or the science behind what it was she was doing. It
was the religion. It was the corruptness within the medieval Catholic Church, and people. In fact, during our television program, people would ask us about this, and we said, "Guys, this is 5 centuries of bad public relations and a public relations war that the medieval Catholic Church won. We're trying to break that down with our little program." Now, I'll show you how bad this was. Okay. We ended up getting the cable station loved all the visibility they were getting. And the president called me in after Larry King's show, handed me 2 13-week contracts, said, "Sign them." Okay. We ended up producing 70 episodes over the next 2 years.
Wow.
Okay. We did over 100 interviews of press, radio, and television media, domestic and international. We're credited with a riot in Rome. You want to hear that one?
Yeah, I actually do.
Okay, October 1991. I get a phone call from ABC News correspondent. He had interviewed me many months before. I think it was Bob Greenwood. I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head, but he called me up and he says, "How you guys doing with your show?" I says, "After a button alligators trying to produce a show and keeping up with all these interviews." He said, "Do you know you guys caused a riot in Rome?" I said, "What?" And this is in October, about 5 months after we debuted. And please understand, this is a $50 a week cable access program. This is the 1991 version of YouTube.
That's creepy. Yeah, that's creepy. Just stemming from that too,
Okay, so here's what happened. Apparently, he says, "Didn't you interview with Italian people?" And I said, "Yeah, they came to our studio." He said, "How about Italian Look?" And I said, "Yeah, they came and did a shoot too. They had their bureau in Washington D.C. because we were there. The world media was there, right? And he says, and he says, didn't Channel 4 Rome come in to see you?" And I said, "Yeah, they were there too." He says, "Well, the magazines all hit the newsstand the same week, and Rome Channel 4 ran their hour-long piece in the 6 to 7 o'clock hour before prime time." I said, "So what happened?" He says, "Well, you have to understand that Rome is mostly high rises for apartments. Okay, just not a lot of single family homes till you get way out in the burbs, and if you got money, right?"
Right.
So all these women started coming out of these high rises into the alleys between the high rises, chanting, and they were marching down through the alleyways. And the more they went through the city, the bigger the crowd got. By the time they got to the gates of the Vatican, they were nearly 3,000 strong, chanting in Italian, "We are the witches, we have returned."
Huh.
That's not a bad street cred.
No, that's really not. So I don't know. How does the Vatican react to that? especially in the 90s. I mean, that's an era where we were borderline, like, you got to check how you behave towards people, because back in the day, they just would have killed those people.
Well, yeah, of course they would have. Back in the day, they had armies too, so they don't now. The bottom line was we didn't get any pushback from it. But, okay, let's zoom ahead. 2014, I'm finishing a 40-year-old bachelor's degree, and it's in entertainment writing at this point, okay?
Right.
I'm in my I only needed about 30 credit hours, basically about 2 years worth of work, with all the stuff I transferred in. Okay.
Right.
And my advisor said, do you have anything with diversity or anything like that? I said, I reached in my briefcase and pulled out the resume and, 5 sheets worth of stuff related to this program. I said, witches, women's religious freedom. I did all this. This is pioneering stuff I did 30 years ago. Do a documentary on it. Okay. So they got me 3 professors. I pulled 4 credit hours for television production. They had one of the professors who was also a director up at the PBS station there in town, to be my advisor on that. A media writing professor signed up for the next 4 credit hours. Okay. And then a history professor, medieval history professor, signed up with me. And basically I had to do everything to their specifications. Okay. And we produced a 90-minute academic DVD, okay, about this, and showing where all of this prejudice was going right up through all the movies and everything right up to 1991. Then we did this program, and Hollywood took notice. Hell, Entertainment Tonight came and interviewed us, and they asked me, they said, Cheryl, I had my witch's crown on and everything, and they said, what would a program now look like? I said, kind of a cross between 30, this dates us, but this is 1991, 30 something and Bewitched. And it wasn't long after the producers for Charmed were talking to us and a couple of my friends.
Huh.
Okay. So this is the kind of influence that I've had subversively over the years, between that and the transgender stuff and everything. So, it gives you an idea of where I'm coming from with all this stuff. So over the weekend, this is how I got to this. Over the weekend, I decided to do a little old school activism using modern tools. I had this map of the United States with the counties showing there's only 105 counties that did not have UFO sightings in 20 years of 2001 to 2020. And I wrote this write-up that said the U.S. Congress has just stated that UFOs, UAPs are probably not from our world. And I didn't say probably, they said are not from our world.
Right.
And I said, there are 43 million people in this country who have been touched by ET. And of course, the first group I went after, as I said, when are the anthropologists in this country, the academic level anthropologists, going to start measuring the scale of us who have been touched? Okay. That was the first one I put up with this map. And I was on Twitter to do this. So I went ahead and did all the hashtags for everything associated with anthropology. Now the anthropology people ran with it. They liked it. I got a lot of good feedback from them and tons of views. Okay. I did it to the psychiatry community, less warming event there. I did it with the journalistic community, and I've had some warmth come back from the journalist community in the last couple of days. So this, by doing it on a mass media platform like that, brought all the people in the mass media, just average person is seeing that I'm making this statement about UFOs. They were able to look at it and said, my God, there are that many of them?
Yeah.
Okay?
It's
the reaction I got.
Cheryl, it's scary. Like I talk to people, and a lot of people are unaware of the presence here in our planet. They know what they know from regular social media. They know what they know from mediocre shows. They have no idea the scale of.
Do you know how many producers have not selected me and Linda to be on their damn programs about their series for UFOs? I've had 24 producers talk to me in the past 2 years, including Spielberg's people at Boardwalk Pictures.
Is it because of transgender, or just because you have so much data that they're afraid it's going to scare people?
Or both. I can't get it. They talked to me for over an hour on the phone, and they talked to my wife for maybe 30 minutes. She was giving them the science spiel. Okay.
Right.
And they picked up the thing from the Vice people, interviewed me on Zoom just as we were going into lockdown. And they told me all through the whole COVID thing, everything was put on the back burner. And they kept dropping me a note every now and then. Says, stay healthy. We can't do this program without you, because I had all the numbers. And I blew their sock. It was supposed to be a 20-minute interview. It went on 90 minutes.
Wow.
Okay. Only because the producer who was interviewing me brought in their friends, and they're asking me questions. Okay. So it turned into a conference call interview. And then Spielberg, at the end of the COVID thing, all these major production companies started buying all these streaming entities. Everybody bought their some streaming entity to be part of their conglomerate. Okay. And Spielberg's organization bought Vice.com. Okay. And the project rolled up to Boardwalk Pictures, and they said, we don't need you. Okay, if we do use you, we'll be in touch. But we've decided to go, and this is a line I've heard at least a dozen times. We've decided to go in a different direction. Jeez. And of the 3 or 4 programs I've already seen come out, what did they do? They went to the same old places: Hudson Valley, Kecksburg, Roswell, Stephansville. Pick some place you've heard lots of, and they probably went there.
Cheryl,
I offered them at the time. I offered them 150 places they've never heard of that had a one-day event that was notable that nobody knows about, and they went, Actually, you know what that is now? It's 728 plus or minus 5 one-day events. Let me explain that. You'll love this.
Yeah.
And for 20 years, the 20 years I'm dealing with, 2001 to 2020, okay, that for one state, that is 7,300 days, including the leap years, okay, for that 20 years, all right?
Right.
All 50 states, that amounts to 146,060 days. The average day in most states has no sightings. And then if there are sightings, it's onesie-twosies. The average per day in the United States is about 23. Now there are spike days, but the average mean for an average year is about 23 to 25 per day in the United States. About 120, 161 per week, about 700 a month, and about 8,400 a year. Okay, roughly. Okay, during the 20-year period. And so that was the deal. Well, I went in. It took me I always had a sense that there were these one-day hot spots.
Right.
And what I went looking for was what all these producers kept coming to me. The documentary producers particularly, they kept coming to me. I had 3 different ones come to me and say, we want to know that hot spot where we could go set up our camera and there's like a sighting there every day kind of thing. The mythical one-day all the time hotspot. The place, as one guy put it, that place where the UFOs, you can almost set your clock by them. It's like a bus stop. It doesn't exist.
Yeah, if only.
No, trust me, it doesn't exist. Okay. So when people say to me, where is the hotspot? I said, are you saying by state? Are you saying by county? Are you saying by a particular season, by a particular shape? Are you saying by zip code? And they said, well, how about zip code? I said, okay, get your pencil out. Okay. Zip code 85001. Zip code 85001. Downtown Phoenix had 1,373 sightings in 20 years. That's the number 1 zip code in the country for sightings. Now people say, wow, that sounds like a lot. No, it averages out only to about 68 a year. and it averages out to about 5 or 6 a month. So if you're going to rent the penthouse on top of some hotel for a month waiting for them, you're going to be burning an awful lot of money waiting for 5 or 6 sightings.
Right. Okay. Exactly what they did at Skinwalker. Exactly that.
Yes, exactly. So then the next couple of metropolitan areas that had a high number at like downtown zip code type of thing, they were by their number was, instead of about 1,373, it jumped down by almost 400 overall. And then it was like 5 or 6 of them. They were all in this range of about 700 or something like this. And then it jumped down to about 400 in that 20 years. Okay. And it went down very steep thereafter. Okay. So that is the problem with the zip codes. So I played around for quite a long time with the data to try and find a way of displaying it that would help me find one-day hotspots. And what we ended up doing, imagine a spreadsheet, 2001 to 2020, going from left to right across the top. Okay, right. So now you got 20 years displayed across the top. Down the side, we did it by days of the month. January 1, January 2, January, basically 365 days by their day. Okay,
right.
Down the left-hand side. Along with that, we put in county and zip code. Okay, I didn't care about the shape, just county and zip code. So you'd go down there January 1st. Here's all the counties that had sightings, and then and here's the zip codes within that county that had the sightings. And like I said, you looked at the grid, most of it's empty, and there's onesie twosies in there. Occasionally a threesie. 4 or more was statistically significant. Okay, so I went through one rainy week back in April. I sat here for 3 days and I went through all 50, each individual state, and generated one of those charts. And then because it was in Excel, I was able to put the comparator around and say, I want to see everything over 4, lit it up. Okay. And the amount is, if you're in California, there was like 220 of them. Okay. But California had 21,000 sightings in 20 years too. Okay. And they were half of the sightings for this, 0.5% of the sightings in the state. But as soon as you got away from that, it dropped down to about 0.25% for most of the other states, except 3 or 4 states peaked up to almost 1/2. Okay. And one state I never expected it to. The ones you thought would have a lot of sightings, the Washington states and Illinois and Texas, Florida, that type of thing. I would expect them. They're in the top 10. What I did not expect was South Carolina, which it ranks down there around 25 of the top states. And they were well over 0.25%. Okay. South Carolina had a lot of these one-day hotspots. Okay. Who knew? Okay. Till we analyzed it this way. So we've identified about 728 plus or minus 4. And, we're getting ready to come out with a new book series, the UFO. I'll give you an example. Ohio's the first one. We got them almost all done. All the PDFs have been built for the entire book for each one of all 50 states. Each of the 50 states has a separate PDF, book length PDF.
That's a great idea, because that will, who's going to benefit from that is MUFON, because they're separated by state. I think that's a great idea.
Well, the beauty here is we're both MUFON data and National UFO Reporting Center data, and we titled the book to make them popular. UFOs in Ohio and where to find them, using that fantastic guess and where to find them kind of thing,
right?
And we figured that would catch on.
I think it will, because it sounds like a tour. Like you pick up at you're visiting Ohio, you stop at the gas station. There's the maps of the sites so you can see the theme parks, and then there's the UFO sightings. I mean, it's
going to be in every mom and pop bookstore. But think about it from the standpoint, it's going to be right up there with Great Murders in Ohio, and the Scenic Mountains of Ohio, the Amish Country in Ohio, all those kinds of tourist books, right?
Right.
And they're small. They're relatively small. California's is going to be a doorstop. It's they got a lot, okay.
Yeah.
But we basically, what we did was in the front of the book, we built the front matter. We put in all the articles we had in the pink book, our UFO sightings desk reference, all research articles, right? And then the last third of it is a specific thing, a couple of things about that state and its dynamics, high level kind of stuff, kind of like you saw in the desk reference. And then we did a dump of data table, one data table that was 20 years across the top. And we did it by county, zip code, municipality, and all the display shapes for that county and zip code for 20 years. And so that got pretty thick for a lot of states. For Florida, it was, I sent a prototype of that to Rubio last year, and Senator Rubio, and it was an inch and a half thick. And I gave a copy of the pink book to him, and that printout in a 3-ring binder, sent it down. It's a 5-pound package. Never heard anything back. And did the same thing that the House Select Committee on Intelligence. They didn't answer me back. But about a week ago, actually 2 weeks ago, I got a very polite letter from head of the Senate, Senator Schumer, who used to be my senator, thanking me for supporting the congressional hearings.
Wow.
And it wasn't just one little terse one-liner. No, it was a bodied letter. It was a very, very nice letter.
I say this a lot. And I was talking to a friend of mine about your books too. I was like, I someone I'd spoken to a couple times, and the data in there it's incredible. Why isn't it more widely used? And I think we touched on it earlier, because a lot of personal stuff, a lot of stigma stuff, and what's going to end up happening is
I'm being sad at.
Yeah, one day soon, someone's going to get out there. They're going to read your book. This person's going to be in a position where he has not just an authority, but more of an influence, and it's going to come to light what this data could have been used. It's sad.
Let me tell you what I did. About a week before the congressional hearings started, okay, and Congressman Andre Carson was leading it for the House.
Right.
His office got delivered a copy of the pink book and a complete printout of Indiana, including maps right down to the zip code and city level. He got about a 3/4 of an inch printout, along with, I gave him the maps. I gave him the summary for a 1-sheet summary, and got a nice executive letter, and said, if you guys really do these hearings and you decide you want to talk to civilian experts, Linda and I are your civilian experts on the scale of it in the United States. Please feel free to invite us. We'll be happy to.
And that's the big problem I take with the congressional hearing. It's a lot of government people. I saw that.
You mean Pentagon spooks and swaggering pilots?
But if you look at the room, a lot of missing acronyms weren't there. The pilots themselves, who were the people who saw this with their own eyes. Yep. And here's the bigger part: why are there not public representatives there and civil? There should be like a representative from every chapter of America, right? There should be regular people there asking the questions. Like some people, representatives of MUFON should be present. Representatives from the government should be there as well. In other words, they ask safe, very safe questions.
There should have been an expertise pool there.
Yeah, like
we would call it a press pool if it was media, but we should have had, like you said, it should have been like the citizen hearings.
Right. There should be a civil person there to represent, a MUFON person, other experts from Pete. There's countless amount of investigators out there that own their own industries and companies. Rick Warner being one, someone I had on the show.
Who's the guy out there in Nevada? Used to own Skinwalker.
Oh, not Robert Bigelow.
Bigelow. Yeah. He owns his own company.
Yeah, but Bigelow, unfortunately for him, he probably has more. He's probably more enlightened than they are. And even if it's not so the case, they're not going to listen to him because
But here's the bottom line: we did reach out. Last summer, we had just gotten the pink book out. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not this past summer, but 21, just before.
They're prior.
Linda and I moved to Ohio in December, so I'm keeping this track. I was still in Syracuse, New York at the time, and one morning I got up and I had a crate of the pink books sitting there under my desk, and I put 2 copies on the couch, and I looked up the House Select Committee on Intelligence and who was in it. And I looked up the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence and who was in it. And Rubio was leading it at the time, but Gillibrand was there too. And I put a package together, very terse executive summary cover letter, half a page tops, no babbling, rambling. It was tight and corporate and right to the freaking point. Okay.
Right.
I printed out the guy who I was sending it to, and I don't remember his name, the guy in this House committee. He was a New York guy. So I printed out New York down to the municipal level with all these display shapes, exactly where they were and what years. And then his was like an inch thick. Rubio's was an inch and a half thick. I put the pink books with them with these cover letters, and we packaged them up and we shipped them off to them. I tracked them to get them there. They got them. Okay.
Right.
And about 3 weeks later, I was walking down the hall outside of my apartment, and I looked outside, and there were 6 cop cars from 3 different constabularies, and they were parked behind my car. And I thought, oh my goodness, what did I do?
What did it end up being?
It ended up, there was our apartment complex was sort of a cul-de-sac, but you didn't know it. And some people came down in there thinking they could get an easy getaway. It was a drug deal. And some old lady called it in and told me, you don't just send one cop. There's lots of these guys under. You got to bust them all. And they sent everybody, but they all ended up parking behind my car. And I thought I was being busted, right? Because I sent all this stuff to Congress, right? But, Linda came to me later and I told her what happened. She says, you have every right to communicate with anybody in Congress. So don't worry about it,
Yeah.
So, and that's fine. And then, like I said, I did it literally the week before the hearings opened up. I sent Andre Carson a similar package. In fact, I templated it from what I had already built. Okay.
Right.
And haven't heard anything from them. But I said, should you decide you want to sit down and talk to the people who have been experienced in this topic from a civilian standpoint, Linda and I wrote the book on it. We are the statistical experts in the United States on UFO sightings from the last 20 years. We can tell you where it all is and where it ain't.
Yeah, because it got really frustrating to watch that when a question was asked. And I'm like, well, we'll talk about that in a closed session. And I'm like, well, then what do you want? Why are you even bringing this to? I think a lot of that's purposely misleading. I think a lot of that is purposely done to make people think, oh, there's a mystery. So let me tell you this, Cheryl. I'd spoken to a military person, retired military anyway. And because I do a lot of off podcast interviews, just for information gathering.
Remember, I was 10 years in the military, so.
Right. So this guy, he reaches out via email. We exchange numbers. I call him, and we're talking about things that he witnessed while he was out in the field. Because eventually, there's a few things I'm doing. One, I'm going to have a small series of just abductees, not people that are investigating or information, just people who had direct experience. Whether it sounds overly fantastic or not, it's just I want to hear their experience. So I'm going to do a small series. There's another small series where I'm going to have people from military backgrounds speak about what they saw. So this gentleman in particular, he made it very clear to me. He's like, places like Area 51, he goes, I'm going to tell you now, the place got popular and we know it's popular, and a lot of stuff that these investigators are out there photographing, it's for their benefit. We're entertaining them, right? Because while their eyes are there, their eyes are not looking elsewhere. And when he said that, it made me think like, holy shit, he's right. I've thought that kind of my own, but now it's kind of, and not confirmed because obviously it's an account of what he's saying, but it makes sense. All these people they're going out to the desert, and we're going to test our stuff there regardless, but why not utilize it as a scapegoat? Right? The smokescreen, have people stare in that direction while the other events take place elsewhere. As far as military applications go, anyhow, I can't speak to ufology because no one's controlling that.
I'll say this to somebody who used to do intelligence gathering.
Yeah.
You kind of, how this whole thing works is you show somebody a really cool puppet show with one hand while you're picking their pocket with the other.
Right. Exactly.
All right. So, during the Clinton administration, if anything was moved from Area 51 that was related to ET, It was moved to someplace up in the deep Colorado mountains someplace, and it was done during the Clinton administration when there were 75 satellite trucks parked outside the White House during the Monica Lewinsky thing.
Right.
Everybody was focused on that. It was tying up the news cycle in layers, and they were able to get away with transferring everything out.
Smart. Yeah.
Okay. And people say, well, how do you know this? And I said, because I read the other kinds of small article press stuff. That's where the intelligence is. These little tiny side stories that nobody pays attention to, right? And that's what I think happened based on the data that I accumulated. Well, but that was just armchair spy stuff. Sorry about that.
Yeah. Let me get this out because I wrote down some stuff. I'm glad you said this, unbeknownst to you anyway. Right. So one of the notes I took from him, it says here, because I asked, I have to ask, like, well, if not Area 51, where? Like an island? He's like, well, no, islands are not easy to control from enemies, right? He said, he goes, I'm not 1,000% on this, but I'm pretty certain to the Dakotas, Colorado, and Utah. So I wrote that down because I thought that'd be interesting. Like, if you really consider what those places are. So I did this thing when he said that to me. I have an Xbox Series X. I go on Flight Simulator. I kind of fast forward, fly over these areas, and there's just nothing for miles.
No, there's nothing up there. I mean, I do the same thing you do. I actually for a while. A couple of years ago, I was logging probably 20 hours a week coming home from work, and it was a couple hours for Linda to get home from work, and I would fly different places, and the flight simulator is good and it's good practice. I'm getting some airtime,
right. But for me, I focus on the idea of flying over these places where, as this gentleman stated, that where we'd be setting up shop, et cetera, and you find it just as far as you could look, there's nothing. And it would be,
and they know how to dress it up so that you go to enter the place, the side of the cliff seems to open up for you, and then close back up, and it just looks like a cliff.
Yeah, and now,
I mean, they know how to dress this stuff up.
And then picture. I hear people say, "Well, I fly over the states all the time. I look down and see shit." Well, listen, imagine a inside of a mountain. Imagine trying to see a doorway that's like 600 feet long, 600 feet tall. You still couldn't see it. You wouldn't be able to recognize it. It's not possible.
Not from the air, especially if it's painted to blend in.
Right, exactly. So that is a prime location to set up other, programs. And then it's genius to keep. It's really bizarre. I think Bob Lazar kind of did in favor. He blew the whistle on them. They're like, all right, well, now we got a spot. They're all going to look there. We could very well go set up elsewhere. And when I talked to that guy, he mentioned those states, and I really took a hard look at him. It's perfect. And then imagine to be underground, because there's, it's alleged that there's underground systems that travel all across the rocky part of the country.
Maybe not.
Yeah, okay. Maybe not. But even if there were, we would never know. The public has no shot of knowing that.
No, we wouldn't.
Yeah, okay. It's impossible.
You remember when Lou Alessandro, he made comments like when he was on a History Channel, the only thing that would stop him was a bullet in the head type of thing.
Right.
Let me tell you where that comes from. And this I'm taking this out of a chapter in my own biography. Okay. It's not published. Among the first lessons I learned about the intelligence profession, first and foremost, it's the second oldest profession with less morals than the first. Okay.
Oh.
That to do this sort of job, one must be grounded in the belief that this work benefits the well-being of one's country. The eminemity is the foundational principle, which means you will go to your grave without your loved ones, relatives, or friends ever knowing what you did for your country. Also knowing that some member of your team has a bullet with your name on it in case of imminent capture. Also accepting that your home country's government will disavow you if you are captured. Lastly, that you lastly, that you can never retire from the intelligence business. You can retire from your day-to-day duties, but you are in the business until your dying day.
Yeah. That's what that guy said too, by the way. An oath is permanent.
You see where I'm coming from?
Yeah, in all the military people I'd spoken to that are career, I hear it's very similar. It's what that oath you take is till the day of your demise, maybe even past that, right?
Yeah, and they passed that bill in Congress that's supposed to be let people come forward. I don't know the details on it. It doesn't really apply to me.
But if you listen to the verbiage and the finer print of that, it's more or less speaking loosely. In other words, if there's a classified subject, you may not speak to that. If something's declassified, you could speak at length at that. If something, so there's like everything else. The thing is
with this classification stuff, normally they declassify stuff in a period of 20 to 30 years. Okay. Right. Intelligence stuff where we'll say like World War II spies, for example, only about 10 years ago, it had been 50 years since the war. And that was considered the window with people, the other side would probably be dead. And so would your guys. And that nobody would come looking for the spy who blew up some factory, right. That type of thing. That's where it comes from, this idea that they classify intelligence level stuff for about 50 years. Apparently, a lot of the stuff with this ET stuff has been classified in such a way that it doesn't come off unless especially sanctioned.
Right.
And so it is exception to all the normal mechanisms for standard declassification of material. Classified material does have a process for standard declassification after a certain time clock. Certain things I did in the Navy in the 1970s came out from underneath the sanction in the early 2000s. Okay, now I would have loved. I'm a writer, so I would have loved to write a good Cold War novel about what fast attack submarines did during the Cold War in the 70s. Okay. But see, we didn't win the war. It was kind of a war of attrition. The Soviet Union sort of went out of business.
Right.
Okay. And I didn't feel comfortable talking about the way we did things and our tactics because the enemy is still sort of there.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I tell people often, like, I remember years ago, maybe a few years ago, I had a friend of mine, anyway, he's one of these people, Cheryl, he subscribes to all the controversy, right? He's one of these people like, well, we didn't land on the moon. I'm like, you think China and Russia would let us get away with that? Stop it. They would call us out so fast. We would be outed so fast. Even then, if we didn't actually do it, they'd out us. There's no shot of silence for that from our adversaries. But that being said, he was discussing the Area 51. People are going to march on a million of us are going to march on Area 51. I'm like, that's a million of you dead. All right, that's private property. And secondly, our government needs to have secrecy. It needs to be there. It's sad to say, because we have adversaries that are every day thinking of a way to get us legitimately. And if we were to put out there everything we have, it gives them the ability to combat that.
This is something that is coming up right now with this stuff, that some of the material, people are all upset that they're saying, well, they're not going to share certain things because it would damage national security by giving away what kind of assets recorded this or something like this. And I don't blame them. That's a sensitive area, how we do our business. And CIA's always said that. We always redact the stuff that explains how we do our job.
Yep.
Yeah, and that makes complete sense.
Keep in mind where like China, they're launching their hypersonic missiles and as a show of force. America's like that poker player. We're like, all right, I'll tell you, you could show us and you could bluff all you please. It's when you lay the cards down is when it counts. And that's the way it should be. Because if they show their hypersonic missile and we go publicly with it, we had that horse shit. I don't know if you remember that when we were with the F-22 when they were when it first came out, Russia or whatever they were at the time, and China, it was like a scramble. Like, oh, we got to get ahead of this because the F-117s in the Gulf War, that scared the shit out of our adversaries. You talk about something that's flying around and it has like the radar signature of a bird. So Yeah.
Birds and bees.
Yeah. So, and that's
that's another thing. I have all these people come to me and say, especially the guys who are the space jockeys. I mean, the real space jockeys. I know a bunch of them that work in the industry of putting satellites up and things like this. And they say, we can track a softball 250 miles out. Why can't we see the UFOs? And I said, look, guys, if we have stealth capability that makes something like the B-2 bomber or the B-52 bomber look like the birds and the bees, don't you think maybe they got something like that?
It's twice as sophisticated. I said this too. I'm glad you brought that up. That David Fravor event, I'm going to let you know now, based on everything I heard, based on all for what David Fravor said and the other account witnesses and what you read, that was them showing this is what we can do. Now imagine what you can't see. That was a show. That was the way David Fravor said he was engaged with that craft or whatever.
That Tic Tac.
The Tic Tac. And the way it behaved and outmaneuvered, and then went to his cap point, which is like a shot in the face. You know what I mean? Like a stab in the side. Like, look what I could do. I'm already here. How did I even know where here was? That was a display for us. No doubt. I've heard from...
let's go there a minute. Let's get away from the technology side of it for a minute and what they can do. At that time, we still had the stigma in place. Okay? So the event... Nobody could talk about it. Okay. You there?
I'm here. I'm sorry. I was reading something real brief.
Okay.
Yeah, the event from that point. Yeah, it's in 2004.
So the guys in the radar ship in that carrier group was, I believe, the Princeton. And when I was at MegaCon, I got to interview a handful of those sailors, including a chief petty officer who was in that CIC that day that happened. They all got their grasp of reality completely rattled when they realized that it was real. It was like a day from Independence Day in that combat control room.
Right.
Okay. Combat Information Center. All right. So now they can't talk about it. They get back. They're all creeped out by it. They can't talk to a counselor about it because their reality has been rattled. Okay, this is back in 2004, 2006 timeframe. Okay, they can't tell their families about it. Okay, and of course, in some cases, as the chief told me, some of the wives figured, okay, who is she? Because the guys were running around all creeped out, nervous and looking over their shoulders and stuff. Right?
Oh yeah, so the wives are like, "What, are you cheating on me? What's going on?"
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, I mean, it almost ruined some Navy families. Okay. And we've got this problem in the civilian community and with the experiencers and abductee community when they've been touched. You talk to most social workers and they just laugh at you and say, I'd like to introduce you to some people who have been abducted and been touched by ET and they need to deal with their PTSD from the experience, and they laugh you out of the office.
Yeah.
I've a friend of mine who's a therapist and I wrote the New York State Social Worker Association and offered to come give them a presentation about the state of the scale of UFOs and the sighting reports in the country. And we said, in the cover letter, these things are not rare. Okay. And then the scale of what this whole experiencer thing is. And we said, let us come and give you a free presentation about this. This is a serious problem that needs to be addressed. And you people are on the front lines. And 4 times we reached out to them and 4 times we got crickets.
Huh.
Okay.
That's, I don't know. It's a common thing I hear a lot. Let's remove UFOs and ghosts and whatever else. Let's remove that. Even people who have psychological events that can't be explained get shunned the same way, pushed aside.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that their suffering isn't real. It just means we don't understand it. We should take greater measure and to help these individuals. Now, if they want to put these people who are experiencers into a position to be like, well, you're crazy and you're making this shit up or whatever you're saying, it's the job of the state and the health system is to help these people to the best of their ability. And even if you feel like they're full of shit, still do what you can for them. They're still people. They're still human beings. You got to treat them. It's mind blowing to me. Now, after I got to tell you too, after 2017 and the release of the military videos, and now you're seeing more and more government officials on television talking about they're real. We don't know what's driving them. We're not sure where they come from. At said point, that's it. UFOs are real. Now, everything else that's out there that people say have to be taken differently, whether it be the experiencer. And here's another thing, too. Not every experiencer.
The government guys are coming clean with this right now.
Yeah.
It seems like the major media still won't touch it with a 10-foot pole.
It's because they're playing that high school popularity thing still, Cheryl. And unfortunately for them, in the near future, that's going to come to a gross explosion in their face. Because let's think about this. Where's mainstream news going to be in the next decade or two? I think it's going to be gone. I think I'm going to be honest. If I want to hear about what's going on in the world, right, and get an opinion that I feel isn't horseshit, I watch Joe Rogan. Isn't that crazy to say? Okay. Because I can't stomach the news. I can't. It drives me nuts. And so that being said, the reality of what's going on as far as when I say paranormal, it's parallel to our normal, right? Cultures from China are parallel to our normal, you know? But the point I make is it's coming to light, and not every experiencer experiences the same thing. There's a lot, just like if you and I go to a theme park, we go on a roller coaster, we're both going to experience it differently. It might frighten me. It might be great for you. And it comes to perception too. I speak at length about perception, the way we could perceive things. So it's a funny business is to label someone anything at all without really looking into it. It's actually irresponsible, right?
Yeah, it is very much irresponsible. I know a couple of people who, you hear about what people talk about the one-off, oh yeah, I got abducted, whatever. But what's funny is a lot of people who have been touched. And if you read between the lines in Whitley Strieber's books and also read the stuff that Dr. Mack wrote, we're talking millions of people have been touched here and don't know it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
I wrote during 2020, I wrote a pilot. Remember, I went to film school. Okay.
Right.
I wrote a script for a pilot for a dramatic, not comedy, a dramatic television series about experiencers. Logline: have you been touched by extraterrestrials? Okay. That goes right to the point. Okay. And, I sent the third draft of the script to Catherine Martin, and I sent it to Susan Hansen down in New Zealand, another prominent researcher, and both of them sent me a page of notes. And mostly the script was fine, except when I was talking about the regression session, they tweaked my fine points, and they were both on the same page with what needed to be tweaked. Okay. Yeah. And I pitched it to about 3 different producers. This is in late 2020. One producer said there's no such thing as the UFOs. Okay. The other producer said, well, there was a program like this called The People of Earth. It was kind of silly. It was a comedy, and probably the subject matter should stay a comedy. Okay.
Right.
Because there's no such thing, And I said, really? And then there was another one who said, nobody wants to see anything about this. This is so rare. Nobody knows it, whatever. That was the tone. Okay. But, the reality is the synopsis for the 15 other episodes in the season reflected things that had happened to real people. A person was out walking his dog. He's in the outer suburb of a major town, and he sees something, and then he's not there. Only his dog is in the backyard, and they find him 275 miles away in someplace in central Pennsylvania, in the middle of some Amish farmer's field, asleep, and he woke up and he's in women's clothes. Doesn't know how he got there.
Huh.
Okay. And of course, the state police think the guy's nuts or on drugs. Okay. And, in the real story, that's how it went down. In the synopsis for the script for an episode, I have him contacting something like Catherine Martin.
Kathleen Martin. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
I love her, by the way. I've had her on a couple times. I love her.
She's terrific.
Yeah, she's great.
So this is where I went with the script. Now I've sat on it now for since then. Okay. And again, like I said, we've got Congress telling us these things are real. I'm out trying to pitch this thing again. Guys, this is real stuff. And they don't want to talk about the numbers. They're too big. Oh my God, these numbers are too big. They can't be real. This is another producer says to me, I've had 24 producers since 2019 touch me. And then when they see the scale of the numbers, but it blows their mind. They say, well, that can't be real. It can't be that big.
You said something to me on a podcast, I think our first podcast together, and it changed something about me. You stated that most people aren't even looking, and they're even at the right hours. They're walking their dog or they're in their phones. They're preoccupied. Like no one. So a lot of people say, well, I don't see shit, and It's because you're not actually observing. You know, you go outside, and 90% of the time, people are facing the phone or they're preoccupied or whatever, and they're direct 360 degrees of them. They're not looking up. They're not spending quality time outside trying to find anything. So
look at the people walking down the street with the kid in the stroller and walking along another 4 or 5 year old. Mom's got her face pushed into her phone.
Yeah. Each kid's got a tablet or something, not even paying attention. So the point I make is, for these and there's a lot of naysayers. It's like Cheryl's crazy.
Oh, they've been nasty on Twitter the last week.
And I tell these people, like, I say this a lot. If you want to prove I'm full of shit, these people are full of shit, go out there and prove it. Go do the research. Go to the same places. Try to get your own data. And the larger percentage, like, well, I don't have time for that. Well, you have plenty of time to talk shit on social media. Go out there and do the work.
Let me give you one. One of the there's like in the UFO community, a lot of people were indoctrinated, and I love Stanton Friedman. Believe me, when he saw we were getting ready to publish the original White Book, I a couple of months before we published it, I was at a conference and I knew he was going to be there, and I took him like a couple of pages from one of the chapters, and he looked at the stuff. He stood up. He's in the vendor suite. He stood up. He's got the paper crushed in his hand. Somebody's finally publishing some data, and I was delighted to see him do that,
Yeah.
Okay. You know how he used to say, he'd have a college, be doing a talk at a college and say, how many people have seen a UFO? And all these hands would go up, or a majority of hands would go up. And then he'd say, how many people report it? And most people sit down and they come back with this whole idea of 1 in 10. And it got sort of institutionalized. Some dentists did the same thing with their patients and things like this. So it became, I don't want to say Bible, but it became scripture in the in the UFO community.
Yeah.
Okay. Now here's the numbers. Okay. Here's the goofy numbers. We've got 100 between the two national databases, which are the biggest. Okay, combined 167,632 from 2001 to 2020. Okay, now if it was 1 in 10 reports it, then that would mean that we had 1,676,320 sightings.
That's a big number.
Yeah, now there's something to support that. Now that's if the 1 in 10 number works. Okay.
Right.
But it doesn't, because here's the deal. Two national polls. Now I always hesitated to touch that whole thing with how many people see and how many people report. Okay. I didn't touch it because I didn't have a metric to measure. 2017, Fox Pictures did a kind of a horror film, and they used the Phoenix Lights as the backdrop for it. Okay.
Right.
Some teenagers or college kids got abducted. Okay. And the backdrop situation that was going on in the background was the Phoenix Lights event. Okay. And all the events that were going on, it wasn't just the one event. It was all these sightings up and down some of those canyons and everything. Okay.
Right.
All right. So, Fox Pictures comes back with this poll in July of 2017 that said, all the same stuff you typically saw in the polls. 36% believe, 42% on the fence, and 17% say it's hogwash. Okay. But they also did another metric at the time, somebody was running for president, and he said, "Who do you want to interact with the aliens?" Was it Romney or Obama, that kind of thing? Okay, but they asked one other question that nobody else had asked in the last 4 or 5 polls that had been done since 2012. Okay, have you ever seen a UFO? And based on their metric data of their polling, 16.74% of adult Americans had seen a UFO. Okay.
They just don't report it.
Well, it's complicated.
Cheryl,
but they say that. They say that. Now, here's the problem. I did it with a bell curve because I went out and did each individual state against their adult population for their state. I use census data for that. Okay. And the number of sightings. So on one end of the bell curve, it was 1 in 150 people that reported what they saw. At the far end, it was 1 in 475 people who reported what they saw, based on the reporting numbers we had from combined databases. And a lot of people weren't comfortable with the top of the bell curve, about 1 in 250. Okay.
Right.
So I've done some refining on these numbers of late. Okay. There were a lot of people coming to me that just weren't comfortable with any of it. So I worked the numbers again from the, 258 million, using 2010 census data. Okay. This is right in the middle of my 20-year period.
Right.
Okay. Close enough. So 258 million people, 16.74 was 43,181,200. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. If it was 1 in 10, it would have been 4.3 million reports, which was the 10%. Okay. That's that 10%. That's that 1 in 10 would have been 4.3 million from that 43 million. That didn't feel right. We don't have that recorded. Okay. So I cranked it the other way with the numbers we had and said, okay, 167,000 times by 10, and that would be 1,676,320. Okay. That's using the 1 in 10 formula. Then I said, okay, let's look at it from just real data. Okay. Here's 43,189,200 divided by 167,632. That's the actual reports. And it works out to 1 in 257.63 people report what they see.
Huh.
And I keep telling people that was the number. 1 in 257. I'm for rounding it off on talk shows and things. I was saying 1 in 250, but the number is 1 in 257.63 or 0.00389. Okay. That's the real numbers. And I have worked it 4 different ways in the past 3 weeks, and I keep coming up with that number. Okay.
I wonder why that's not like that.
Nobody wants to hear 200. Oh, Cheryl, it's got to be smaller than that. More people report than that. I said, no, here's the real data. Now, maybe there's some error in there because some people call an editor's office at a newspaper and they throw it in the garbage can, right. Or they call the police department and it goes on the blotter, but it goes nowhere. Or they share it with their friends on Facebook and it goes nowhere. Okay. Yeah, there's some error there. But the 2 national reporting agencies which are talked about in the news all the time, Newfork particularly, that's 60% of the data. Okay. I mean, that is so precise that when George Knapp called me in early 2020, told me that the phones are ringing off the hook. There's UFOs up the wazoo right now. They're back. And I said, let me find out. I went out and took the first 2 months of national report data, just the summaries for the first 2 months of 2020. I stuck them into my model, and at the end of the year, I called him back an hour later and said, George, if this holds up like this is going to be the best year since 2012. And it was. And he said, how do you know this? And I said, I got a mathematical model that suggests this is where it's going to be at the end of the year. And I was within 2%. So this is somewhat predictable because it was on a natural upswing. They were coming back anyway. But the deal is people keep balking at that 1 in 257. Oh, it can't be. That has to be more people than that. Can't it be 1 in 10? The data doesn't support it.
There needs to be a
Numbers tell the
documentary
truth.
where your data is shared a little more widely. You know, like
Yeah,
one of these
trying.
networks. Well, here's the problem. I think I figured out what the problem is. Your data goes on one of these networks, and it's not fantastical. It's not, it's not whimsical. It's data, and it's the real data, and it's eye-opening data. And the problem with that is that there's no spin to throw on it. That's where the problem lies.
Yeah. We had a producer that went and pitched this to the Science Channel. We thought they were a good fit for this. We actually did some bloody science.
Yeah, you would think on
they
the
weren't
Science
interested.
Channel. Yeah,
they
of
weren't
course.
interested in what little bit of interest they did show. They wanted some pretty 20-something instead of the two old baggy ladies who did the real science. They didn't want the real scientists. They wanted us to give the words to the 20-something. We said, no way, we're going to let her parrot our data.
That's crazy, especially when it's real data supporting real facts. It's
real science. You guys are the Science Channel. And You're not going to show real scientists researching this weird topic matter.
That's equivalent to watching ESPN to learn how to cook.
Thank you. Exactly.
So it's a scary thought. There's a guy, Dr. Wilbur Allen. Did I mention him to you before?
I've heard the name, but I don't know where I've heard it.
Yeah, I've had him on the show a couple times. I want to connect you with him. He's another guy searching for data, right? And he's an inventive person. He's a pretty smart guy. He gets shunned because of his experiences, but when you listen to him speak and the data he has to bring to light, you and him share something in common. Like you're looking for real data to present. And like you, I think he's getting a shun as well, unfairly. So I'm going to connect the two of you. I need to responsibly do that, like straight away.
Okay, let me tell you two other things.
Yeah.
One, I got to tell you about some Silicon Valley guys that recently touched us.
Good.
And then Rich Hoffman told me. Actually, it wasn't him. It was Dr. Bob Gavir. Told me he was at the CSU down there in Alabama. Rich Hoffman's thing. Okay, with all these professors and things.
Yeah.
And there were these professors who had this experiment. They were kind of influenced from our data. Okay. And they put a big map of the United States to the wall and they threw a couple of darts at it. And wherever they landed, they went and investigated to see what people thought, whether or not it was a popular,
I actually like that approach.
It was interesting.
I like that.
They talked to people in diners and supermarkets and things. And the amount of people who said they had seen something just at a place that doesn't even show up, doesn't even log any reports, right?
Right.
Had so many things talked about by people. They said the scale of it was beyond belief. Now, remember that number I gave you there? Maybe we had 1.6 million sightings that weren't reported, that was seen and not reported,
right, Right.
Maybe was it 4.3 million in the United States that weren't reported? Maybe, So I'm encouraged that these numbers are all over the place like this. Now, about a month ago, 4 or 5 weeks ago, there was an article in the paper, in the news feeds about some Silicon Valley company we're gonna build a database and we're gonna have credible data in it. We're gonna use big data.
Yep.
And it's going to be credible. And they reached out to me. At first, I thought it was hackers. I really did. I get a request about every other week from somebody who wants to get our database and put it up for free on the internet. And I told them our database is not going to go for free. If you want to see stuff, go look at MUFON, go look at Newfork. Our data's got so many algorithms built into it, and we don't have any stories. That's the first thing we ditch. We just keep what, when, where, what shape, Yeah,
and, I mean, exactly how data should be. I agree.
I think I got all this stuff. I don't. All we did was keep statistical data. So these guys called us up, and Linda and I sat here in 2 chairs in front of the camera. And they started telling us, well, yeah, what we want to do is, yeah, we're going to have this big database for, for credible things for academia to tap into and other types of professionals to tap into. And we want to bring it down to, your iPad phone and your Android phone that you can like look it up for a small charge, and that you wanted to make money on it, obviously, and we want your help. And first thing Linda says, she is the CEO of our business. So, I do most of the speaking, but she's the primary owner of the business. And she says, and so you are going to pay us for our consulting? Well, no, we didn't say that. He says, well, if you want information from us and how to make your database better and how to refine it and to improve on it like we've done, then we want to be paid as consultants. We used to be government contractors, and we still think like government contractors. We want to be consultants. And they started pushing back. Oh, but we're trying to do this and we're trying to do that. And we want to get it on the iPhones. And Linda went off on them like a rabid dog on the video call.
It sounds like typical Silicon Valley, right? They want you to share the information, share the data, and then they get to utilize it without any contingency.
And they didn't want to pay us for our expertise. Well, we just want to know how, and as they explained a couple of things, and we looked at them and said, how we developed the data to come out with reports that you can't generate right now, because you've got all this data. You went out there and raided all these other databases and got data. You've been taking things out of books. They told us they were taking things out of books and putting them in, things like this, right? I said, that data is copyrighted that you copied out of that book. Okay. And so you say you've got 200,000 sightings from worldwide, and you're ranking them in your database with the level of credibility or weight you think that sighting has, And it says, but we can't generate. We've got copies of your book. We don't know how to generate charts like you generate. I said, that's the secret sauce. That's our expertise. You want to consult with us? Bring money.
Exactly. Exactly.
What's wrong with that? You're doing it as a capitalist operation. We're a capitalist operation too. You want our expertise? That's our secret sauce. We're not going to give it to you for nothing.
I'll tell you what you should start thinking about.
They got the guy on the call, the lead guy in the call, got into a back and forth argument with Linda. Shut off. I went back to him a day or two later. I apologize for Linda going off. I'd be happy to help you in any way possible. And I sent that email 3 times over a period of 3 days, and they have never answered. So they don't want to have anything to do with us. But that's what some of these firms are doing right now. They're coming out, they're asking for people in the UFO community, think we're just going to lap up to them like lap dogs and give them anything they want because they're going to stroke us right. No. You're talking 2 wonderful capitalists here.
I'll tell you what, something you should focus on, because your data based on sightings is incredible. I mean, that's wonderful data. For me, and this is why I'm going to do the series with the abductees.
I've had a dozen people come up to me at conferences and said, "Hey, I know how to get it up so we can put it up on people's Androids and things like this." And I said, "I don't want to."
No. Yeah, I prefer you didn't do that. I want it in the hands of actual people who are going to go out there and use the data to try to, seek out information truthfully.
I've had so many nice letters from MUFON investigators that said, "Wow, I can go into a county now." Right. And have the whole picture, not just CMS.
Right. And it's not contaminated by everyone's information. That's the perfect part. So for your, maybe if you could, over the course of time, not that I'm going to task you to do it, but the data surrounding abductees and experiencers, because there's not a real data source there. And
that's the problem. Let me tell you where that comes from too.
Okay.
In 2017, after our white book came out, let's see, New York Times, all these people did press on us. Okay. I got a call from Steve Bassett, and we had a long chat on the phone, and he told me he wanted me to reach out to Whitley Strieber, and Whitley never returned my mail or returned my calls. Okay. Uh-huh. And I've never met him personally. So I've read his stuff, but I've never been able to actually talk to him in person, which I've wanted to. Okay. And basically what Steve Bassett told me is that Whitley's wife got all the mail over the years, and they had somewhere between 150 and 475,000 letters.
Wow.
And he said, could you guys do what you did if you could get your hands on that? I said, we're not going to out anybody, but I said, if we wanted to tabulate against years and things like that, yeah. I had another guy came to me only in the last 6 months and wanted to correlate all of this against the Nike missile sites. Because the and then I got him to say, are you just wanting to see whether or not they're haunting the Nike missile sites back in the 50s? I mean, I don't even have that in my database. We only do 2001 to 2020. This is 21st century stuff, right?
Can you imagine if you did the data stemming back from the 40s, matching that with your data? It'd be astronomical.
No. Let me tell you what it is. When our white book came out, all these people in the UFO community, one, they thought we fell out of the sky. Oh, two gay ladies? Charts, graphs, and numbers. There's no case reports in there. Oh my God, where's your 20 best case studies? That was their whole attitude. Oh, you're queer too. Ew. A guy today told me, what you do makes me gag. This guy said this to me today on Twitter.
Ugh.
Okay. Just who you are makes me gag. How can I trust your data?
Well, that guy clearly has a low IQ, because if that makes him gag.
We've met a lot of them like that. But okay, here's the deal. They came back to me when we did 2001 to 2015. They said, why didn't you go back 40 years? Now, the perception is that 40 years is the golden age of UFOs. Okay. So when we were putting the 2020 book together, we weren't going to do that data, mix it in with our stuff. We're going to stay pure with our 21st century data. But in our introduction in the pink book, we did get the data from we got a dump from MUFON, got a dump from Newfork going back to 1960. So we had 1960 to 2000. Okay.
Right.
It averaged about 200. When you graphed it, it looked like a little snake going across the lawn, hump up, hump up, hump up and down, hump up and down, hump up and down, like a snake crawling across the lawn. Okay. That little 6 to 7 year cycle. Okay. Okay. That's what it looked like over that thing. I'll send you that slide.
Okay.
And so we had that, and it averaged about 250 to 600 a year. The year in 2000 had 600. It was the most of that whole 40-year period, and it added up to the whole 40-year period by itself, 1960 to 2000, added up to 15,156 sighting reports. Okay?
Okay.
I've got that many in 2012, 2013, 2014 each year.
Wow.
Okay. If that was the golden age, then what we're living in right now, the last 20 years, is the freaking platinum age.
Right, exactly. It's, okay. Cheryl, there's another thing too.
It's this perception that back there was when the real UFOs were around. Baby, we are swimming in them right now.
And if you look back again, even at biblical times and the accounts of when we were crossing the seas and finding America, like there's been sightings stemming back to ancient man. It's scary to say ancient man. It's really in the scale of time in our universe, it's the blink of an eye. It's yesterday, but it's ancient man, and there's been sightings since then. It just, to them, it was angels or.
Have you ever heard of the stone up on an island up in northern China?
No,
I don't remember. I can't remember how to pronounce the name. I used to be able to pronounce it. I took this from the Air Force 370 manual that used to be used at the Air Force Academy from 1966 to about 1972.
Right.
It was called Physics 370, and there was a chapter about extraterrestrials, and it was telling these young cadets that as officers, you're going to experience this stuff. Okay. That's before the Christian right took over the Air Force Academy, but there was talk in this thing, there was NASA data in there that talked about this 40,000-year-old stone tablet on this island in northern China that has the sculpture of something that sort of looks like the god Ganesh, it looks like a gas mask on his face with a big hose kind of thing, little
Right.
elephant kind of face, And they said it looks like, but it doesn't look like a physical thing, like a body part. It looks like technology, like a breathing apparatus. Is how they described it. Okay. So it was in that whole flavor. This is 1968, talking ancient aliens kind of mindset. Okay.
Right.
And of course, that was the same time that Von Daniken came out with this stuff.
Well, what are they thinking?
So, they've been with us a long time, baby. In fact, I wrote a short story back about 6 months ago. I'll send you a link to that. It's called Dragons Are Among Us. And it's about the reptilians who taught the people in Göbekli Tempe, the place in Turkey.
Oh, yeah. Graham Hancock speaks at length about that.
Okay. The reason the Adams and the Eves were thrown out of the garden was not because Eve ate an apple. It's because there was a hunter-gatherer culture. And I got Smithsonian to back me up on this data. Okay.
Right.
Okay. Göbekli Tempe. Okay. That was kind of a place where all the hunting clans came back to and celebrated the hunt. Okay.
Right.
And the celebrations continued as long as the beer flowed. And they knew how to make beer. This is 12,000 years ago. Okay. So, but the grains used to make the beer were natural growing grains and was limited supply. The reptilian females who were here as advisors teaching us laws and how to do farming taught the ladies who made the beer in the village how to culture and grow the grains. Hence, we have a number of goddesses in Greece, in Egypt, in Samaria, in Turkey. Ancient goddesses are the goddesses of beer.
Yeah, it still gets me when you look at that Sumerian tablet and it displays the solar system in perfection. It even Neptune, Pluto.
Have you seen some of the little statuettes there? They're all very gentle reptilians.
I'd have to look more at those.
Okay, the people I've interviewed who have had engagements with reptilians, they say they're not the big mean guys you see pictured in cartoons and sketches on the internet. They're soft-spoken, they're gentle, they're intelligent, and they have a sense of humor.
Huh. I spoke about this at Margie K. And
She's a great lady. I like her.
Yeah, and a number of people, in fact, this theory that the gray alien, the taller one, the actual biological one, the smaller gray aliens are robotic. They're biological robots. Yeah. And that other races utilize them now as something to rent when they want to do research here on the ground.
They're like they're biomechanical.
Yeah, biomechanical. And they utilize the little gray ones. No matter what race of alien it is, they're renting these to go down and do the groundwork. I say this because there's a guy I'd spoken to who's an abductee, and again, I'm going to have him on, where the reason he reached out to me was because he heard that theory. And he's like, there was a time where I was in a situation where I was abducted, and one of the smaller gray ones, I believe, malfunctioned. And they removed it because it started like repeating the same movement over and over again, he was telling me, and they removed it. The other ones removed them, and then another one came in its place. And when he said that to me, I was like, wow. So that was just a little thing that he heard that and he reached out because that's what made him want to come forward and speak about it. So hypothetically speaking, we don't know how many races have come here to watch us, but what we do know is that the smaller gray alien, the biomechanical thing, which you could have a consciousness upload and treat it like an avatar in a sense, is a success as far as what goes down there and does the groundwork. Because even in Whitley Strieber's book and depictions on the movie, there's another entity that's around. It's not a little gray.
It's the supervisor. It's a tall white. Yeah.
Right. So, and then even the smaller green, there's another one, a smaller thing that's biological, but it was more like a worker in some way or another. But the point I make is it makes more practical sense. And if you speak in terms of how large the universe is, and if these things there's more beings that are advanced. They did it as a species. They came here as a species. They didn't come here as individuals.
That is something that I argue now with, like, press people who are talking, and they always get off on a half-cocked, they got an article about aliens, and they won't talk to you about numbers. They won't talk about anything else.
Right.
And what they're missing, they want to talk about the weirdness. They always seem to gut in on the weirdness.
Right, right.
And what they're missing, and this goes back to that line I used in 2019. If you can't deal with me, you won't deal with the ETs.
Right.
The deal is, it's not so much the weirdness of who they are, guys. It's we have spacefaring races coming here, visiting and studying us.
Right.
We are not alone.
Right.
This is momentous stuff.
We are one
sitting on it.
Right. We're one project of probably many projects across the vastness of the universe. There's probably a lot of Earths that have.
Look at the James Webb pictures.
Yeah.
At least a few weeks ago.
That
rattled. I've been seeing all kinds of feeds from the Christian magazines and things.
Yeah.
How do we deal with the James Webb's thing? Because the universe is, we always thought we were the center of the universe. Now it's big. It's bigger than even we imagined.
Yeah.
I mean, Sagan said billions and billions. Well, it's really trillions and trillions.
Right. Right. And here's the kicker too. We're starting to figure out that, or we're coming to the idea that there is no Big Bang. Like, we're not expanding. It's just infinite. And we didn't have the ability to see that. Now we have the ability to somewhat notice that this is an infinite thing. And it might be that we're one bubble universe of many, many bubbles. When you put that in perspective, it goes to question, how large do things get? It's inconceivable for us. That's how large.
Yes.
So,
well, I have to teach my mystical students. I teach them, you are connected to everything, everywhere, every when.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they said, well, how tight is that connection? I said, well, when you talk about entanglement theory, most Americans and Westerners tend to think of, take your two little fingers, kind of hook them together and kind of pull on your two fingers for that little hook.
Yep.
And they tend to think of entanglement like that. This is the Einstein stuff, goofy stuff at a distance. Okay.
Yeah.
And that is something we talk about in magic constantly.
Yeah,
okay? How you can affect something at a distance. Okay, mages have been known how to do this for millennia. Okay, so here we go. And they said, I was in a lecture literally about 2 weeks ago. I was at the Pagan Pride Day and I was giving a lecture about this. And someone says, well, how strong is the entanglement with all the things we're connected to in the universe, Cheryl? And I took one hand and I clamped onto the wrist on the other arm. And I took the wrist of the hand of that arm and clamped onto the other wrist. You know, that kind of thing where you haul somebody up off a cliff with.
Yeah.
And say, that's how strong the entanglement is. If you don't believe me, start talking to any German physics professor.
You know, another thing too is when you look at the universe, and I said this a lot, but you look at the cosmic web that we viewed, the way we viewed it, the dark matter there attached to it.
Yeah,
It very well seems like you could just transfer data almost like fiber optically across the vastness in the universe just based on that. Now, scale it down. Everything on Earth, everything on Earth.
Remote viewers do it all the time.
Yeah, so if you scale down, you look at the on Earth, the spider webs and our circuit boards and our brains, when you look at it, imaging and cells, it's the same structure, just at a smaller scale.
Yes, it is.
It's all very similar. And then here's the bigger part, too. I was thinking about this one night. My niece asked me once, if you break a piece of salt, how small does it get? It was a good question from her, because how it becomes at a point where we can no longer perceive it, but it's still there. It's just smaller and smaller. We can no longer. So when we look at the construct of everything, it's all very similar, all of it. So are we all connected? Absolutely. Is there an energy source? More than likely. Should we stop looking at each other with our differences at a flesh level? We should. But unfortunately, we don't. And for us to be a successful species to one day go explore the vastness of our universe with better technology that we may come across or given to us, we better behave like a species first, or else irresponsibly, we'd go somewhere and just decimate another existence. We can't go there now.
Yeah, that, Tesla had it right. And he said, if science began exploring metaphysics, they would learn more in 10 years than science has learned in 100.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I agree.
When I wrote my book, Magical Musings of a Rogue Witch, and I published it last January, as my retired Wicca Priestess book and retired Magical Master book. And I stripped away all of the gobbledygook normally associated with books on magic and witchcraft.
Right.
I stripped it all away and went for the jugular vein and said, here is the magical physics. This is the physics. This is high order physics. And if you think, and for the witches who say, oh, we don't have anything to do with remote viewing, well, learn how, because once you start learning to meditate and connecting with the great consciousness at an unconscious level by quieting all the chatter in your mind, and everything in our culture is set up to distract you.
You're right.
Okay, you can't walk into a restaurant now that there's not 10 screens playing a sports channel or something. Okay.
Right.
So I tell my students, I'm getting ready to teach a new class. It's going to start about 4 weeks. And I told them it's every 2 Monday nights a month for the next year. And I told them you are going to learn how to meditate during the course of the class. And I'm going to teach you with binaural technology. I'm going to teach you breathing and things like this. But I said, I'm going to teach you to do this because all the best magic I didn't get from books. I learned it from the cosmos.
That's the best way put. I like that you said it.
That's how Tesla did it. That's how Einstein did it. He did it with thought experiments. Okay. Thought experiments also work out to connecting to someplace else. And Einstein once commented, it's like we've walked into a library and there's thousands of books, and I have basically looked at one page in one book.
You know, Cheryl, before we close out,
sure,
the next episode, which I want to do with you next month now, regarding that book, regarding your thoughts on that, because it's intrigued me now. Now I need to know, right? It's no longer like I'm curious. You're the one we were just discussing without all of it. I want to learn all of it. So before we close out, let everyone know where they can find your books and any information they need to. I'll put it in description as well, but just verb it to them.
Okay. All right. Okay. If you want the UFO data books, okay. First thing, if you want stories, if you go to Amazon, do the book search on Amazon. Don't do it on Google, but do it on Amazon. Go to the book search category and put in Costa UFO. You will get my UFO books. Okay. There's a white book. It's UFO desk reference from 2001 to 2015, but the more updated version is, UFO sightings desk reference 2001 to 2020. It's bright pink. You can't miss it. If you want stories, there's a book up there that's got all my columns from my newspaper column from 2013 to 2019, 238 articles. It's called the UFO Beat. That's available there. If you want to read my book of magic, this is the cheaper of all those books. It's called Magical Musings of a Rogue Witch. And if you do the Amazon book search, and just put in Costa witchcraft, Cheryl Costa witchcraft, whatever, you'll get this book, and you'll see a nice big picture of me sitting there with my arms crossed with a big magic wand.
Excellent. I'll put that in description. Definitely.
And I put this out to to my peers, all the published really good magical adept people, the Silver Raven Wolves, those kinds of folks. And I sent them the second to the last draft, and I said, tell me what you think. I thought they were all going to hate it because it was so distant from everything else, what everybody else was publishing.
I just wrote, I was writing a list of things to ask for the next episode regarding that book. So,
well, I mean, Silver Raven Wolf came back and said, all my students are going to read this book. Another lady comes back and says, this is a masterpiece. Another one says, approaching magic and witchcraft from a reverent but common sense perspective takes us back to Cheryl takes us back to square one of magical theory and lays down a new roadmap.
I'm excited for that.
There's other one. Bravo. This is fantastic. This is the real heart and soul of the craft. This is the way it should be taught. And so I was flabbergasted because I thought they would all hate it. So
our next episode together is dedicated to that and that alone. I'm excited for that. For those people listening right now, if whether it be day or night or whatever it is for you, we're going to say good whatever, and I'm going to talk to Cheryl in post.
Sure.